Most people don't say no to real estate development because of time or money. They say no because they don't see themselves as a person who does development. So when I get asked, will this work for me? I think about my own journey, and it didn't start by saying, oh, now I'm going to do development. It progressed over time before I even had the language of it, right? It actually started at a very young age for me, spending time in showrooms in Germany. So my father is in the interior design business in the ultra luxury segment. I was very fortunate to be able to tour with him. I just went and joined his business trips as a young girl. And I loved everything that was shiny, pretty, and just had wonderful aesthetics, right? And so that's how I was drawn initially to real estate. I started collecting samples in different magazines. I just really love beautiful spaces. And eventually I started working in an architecture shop just because I was really curious, okay, how are they going about their process, right? I just was this very curious learner at a very young age. And what really just drew me to real estate was how people go about the design process, how it all comes together, and just having this blank canvas essentially you get to create, whether it's like a white room, right, or a full house. But even back then, I didn't think specifically that I was going to become a real estate developer. It grew over time, and I think I was pulled into that responsibility as I actually went on in my journey. And eventually it became obvious that that was the next step, right? That was going to take me to the next level. I think it's interesting when people ask me, or I can see it in their eyes, will this work for me? At the end of the day, I come at it from the standpoint of what identity do you want to step into? What lifestyle do you want to live? What are you really excited about when you wake up every day? And if development is something that just really fires you up and that's going to be your end goal, then that is the point where in my life I found I want to learn this. I want to commit and grow into that responsibility of figuring this out. How I got into development was really a progression, but I felt so pulled into it without even thinking to label it as, oh, it's this big thing and I'm going to get to create and build houses and develop property. It was more so like really solving for one property at a time of what the highest and best use is, right? If you're asking, will this work for me? I don't think you're behind. You're exactly where you need to be. You're actually getting curious and you're just getting started. This belief keeps people stuck. A lot of people quietly believe people like me don't do development. Why do people think that? Because who are traditionally real estate developers? A lot of times people envision this older, white, middle-aged man who just has a bunch of cash stacked up doing development. We're taught by the media that is what it is, right? A lot of times, or like through politics and, social norms. But that is not true. I know a lot of guys that have been 25, 30 years in the industry, and they actually have a background of coming from nothing. They really self-built because that is possible in the US, right? And it's just like that people see what they have now. So I think it's really important to shine light on the fact that anybody that really sets their mind to it can become a real estate developer. I certainly didn't have the background. Nobody in my family is a real estate developer or, real estate guru. I came to real estate more so from a design perspective through my father, as I mentioned earlier, but I didn't have that background. I just grew more into real estate through the experience as a 13-year-old working in an architecture shop, building the 3D models and walking the first time during Ruffin, a multifamily project. And, really just spending time with the matter. I just wanted to really be around it. And I knew at some point I was going to be investing in real estate, but I thought I was going to go on Wall Street. I'm going to do all these fancy high paid jobs. And then eventually I'll have my own business. And then whenever I have enough money, I'll be investing in real estate. That's what I really thought. I don't have that typical background of a real estate developer. I actually really went into development to solve for my immigration issue at the time, right? Like it became a solution to the problem that I was solving for. And so whether it is increasing your income or building generational wealth or possibly also solving for an immigration issue or just being absolutely curious about that process of what it takes to do a development project, there's so many different avenues that you can come to development, but you certainly don't have to have that background. And I certainly didn't. So there was no straight linear path, right? And that's what makes those journeys also so beautiful that, we come at development from all different perspectives, whether it is, just you've had some investment experience in real estate, you've flipped a few projects, you may have just worked on a construction project in some capacity. You're on the building side, or you're an architect, civil engineer, you name it. Maybe you have just a different type of background. You're in a financial world or have a high paying W-2, and you know that, hey, I'm a really good project manager. I know I can do this. I just got to learn the blueprint. Like, there's so many different facets on how you can come to real estate. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. Ultimately, it takes vision, grit, and good management skills to pull it all together. You grow as you learn as you grow. I think that when you think about getting started in development, it's more so that commitment not to give up and to surround yourself with the right people. That's what I did. I surrounded myself with people that were steps ahead of me. And, I learned like the absolute hard way. I heard this saying earlier, actually, in an audiobook that I was listening to. Try and error is the worst way to learn. It's
like pin the tail on the donkey.
I see a lot of people wanting to check all the boxes before they get started. But I didn't check all the boxes when I got started. I certainly didn't. I didn't have any credit. I didn't have really capital of my own to put into deals. I didn't even really have the network when I first got started. I had to piece it all together step by step. And so I really believe that if I can do it, then, any American can, because there are already so many steps ahead of me by simply just being American already, right? I immigrated as a developer, and real estate development is what allowed me to do that. I think when people are trying to do something new, then it's about like just really taking the leap, because nobody's born ready, right? I wasn't just born ready, and I was just like curious and willing to learn no matter what it took. And I think like my background on paper, sure, like, I was able to show that I've come through on other projects, or I've had some sales experience and financial experience. But at the end of the day, I thought about what could an investor be interested in? What background do I bring to the table that shows my character of pulling through and making stuff happen, right? And that's really what I focused on. I had some sales experience, some financial experience, but even if I didn't, right, like what I would be looking for is just any kind of management or leadership that I showed in some kind of a capacity. Some people are amazing in nonprofit leadership or charity work. Whatever it is, that is ultimately what people want to see. It's all about who you are and like what character you bring to the table. Are you investable? That is the big question ultimately. When I started, I thought about, okay, what can I bring to the table? I think that is the mindset. That is the identity that is really required to be successful in development. There was nothing obvious about me that said, oh, she's going to be a real estate developer. And that's actually true for most people that are really darn good at it. Development isn't an identity that you're born into. Development is a role that you step into once you decide to operate differently. This is my absolute favorite. When people tell me they've only done one flip, well, guess what? At some point, everybody just has done one flip, or, has had one rental, or has done one development, or whatever it might have been, right? Yeah, I've flipped a lot of properties now, in my career, but at the same time, that is a starting point. And it's an amazing starting point, because you've already shown that you've worked with trades. You already have shown that you can start and finish a project, right? You've already seen the different intricacies of a construction project. So that is an amazing starting point. And I see so many people undermining themselves by saying, oh, I've only done one or two flips, or, I'm just a year in the industry. What are you waiting for? That is a starting point. Who says that you have had to do 10 flips to then move into real estate development? Like, that's just a myth, right? That's not how even corporate America works. It doesn't necessarily say, oh, you have to have managed exactly 8 people before you get promoted to be the next manager. No, either you've managed or you have not, or either you have that experience to a certain extent or you don't. I think it's interesting when people say, yeah, my experience isn't enough. Well, when do you have enough experience? Like, that point will never come. It's never came for me that I would say, oh, I have enough experience. Yes, I'm an expert in, real estate development, but I would say that there's a lot of things still that, I'm constantly learning. Everybody's learning, whether you are Bill Gates or Donald Trump or Barack Obama, it doesn't matter. Everybody still is learning on a day-to-day basis. So when people talk themselves small by saying, I don't have enough experience, then that is just sort of that initial fear, which is healthy, right? There's got to be some kind of psychological level of like, hey, I'm new to this. I do need to make sure I surround myself with pros, or, hey, I'm going to really like track my lessons here. Or I will like take this slow, or hey, maybe I need to bring in someone who also has that experience, or I might need like some level of mentor or expert to join this deal to help make this a better team. Well, that's fair enough, right? It's a starting point. If you never start, then you're never going to get that bit of more experience, right? And another flip is not going to just help you to get closer to then going into real estate development, because at the end of the day, if you've done one flip, two flips, three flips, the process is ultimately the same, right? And then as long as you have some level of like, hey, okay, I have an idea of what I'm getting into, I think that is always good to have. But I think measuring experience or saying, hey, I don't have enough experience, I've only flipped one house, is not something that should keep someone from getting into actual ground up real estate development. As I've shared before in other videos, I was forced into new construction, thank God, by the government. I had flipped a lot of properties because that's ultimately what we were up to. We thought we're just going to scale that. But the government told me that renovations don't count as a business under US immigration code because you're just recycling value and it's not actually creating original value on US soil. So I was forced by the government ultimately to evolve, to reinvent myself, right? And I solved that obstacle by saying, okay, all right, I'm going to build ground up construction on US soil, hiring Americans. And, I'm not going to be a job taker, I'm going to be a job provider. And ultimately, that was what really pushed me into the ground up world. And I'm really thankful that it did, right? It forced me to think bigger and also think about, okay, is there another way to go about this? And I can really urge anybody to think about, okay, well, if I'm already investing my time in construction, like how can I invest my time smarter? Because as a fix and flipper, you start a project, and every time you start a project, you're going to have surprises because you're going to be opening walls. You might even find out, hey, we can't move this wall, we can't do that. With new construction, you're not really running into that, right? Like, yes, of course, it can be also some other surprises, but it's more on the front end that you'll like see whether something is feasible or not. And so it's giving you a blank canvas. It's giving you the ability to design a floor plan that's really functional, that people will love, and you're not competing with like wacky doodle type of floor plans and houses. And I think there's a huge advantage to real estate development ground up versus just like sort of the redevelopment fix and flip world. It's just not as scalable, in my opinion, from what I've seen and experienced. And so I think it's just interesting that when we focus on building original value with real estate development, that also even the government awards that differently. I was taught early that, the bigger problems you solve, just the bigger money you're going to make and the more success you're going to have. That's how I was taught early in my career. I didn't start with development either, right? Many of you have seen in my previous videos that I flipped a bunch of properties, and that's really how I initially got started. And I just was on this mission, okay, well, I'm going to have to build a company here in order to stay in the US because no company would sponsor me. And so I updated my immigration paperwork to like entrepreneurial status, right? I moved from New York City back down here from being on a tech startup briefly. And that's really where I learned how to put stuff together. But I didn't start on the development side. I really basically went, okay, well, I can't control tech, but I can control houses. Like, let's flip a bunch of houses and let's make some money. And like with that, I can employ people. That way, I can prove the government that I am a good steward and that I can build a functional, viable, profitable business. And so, yeah, in fact, I was really good at flips, but the government didn't see the flipping side as value creation because in 2018, they came and tried to deny my application saying, well, you're not creating original value on US soil. And so by going into ground up development, I solved for that because I went and said, well, what about building original value on US soil, hiring Americans? Will that work? And so thank God it worked that way because I was able to think bigger and also with that build original value that ultimately was rewarded much bigger, right? Like than just flipping properties. And so I think it's interesting that even the government differentiates on that level. So it's just something to think about. And I know also there are a lot of immigrants watching my content and engaging and like seeking help. And so I really think real estate development is that loophole, if you will. It's amazing that as a housing provider, you're able to immigrate here. And I think it's really powerful. I think there are amazing immigrants here in the US doing amazing work. And I think real estate development is a beautiful industry where you can come to communities and create original value there that is benefiting so many communities and diversifying communities. Real estate development really changed everything. The government essentially changed everything for me to go into ground up development. I want you to know that I didn't start with ground up development either, but I think, with everything that I know today, it is so much more scalable. I think that fix and flips, you scale out really quickly because at the end of the day, you can only take on so many at a time. It's very difficult to build new crews that you can trust like that on that level, that can always figure it out from scratch, because you can't really just say, okay, all right, I'm going to do always everything exactly the same way. Where with development, you have a really scalable business model, right? And it doesn't take a bunch of people. You actually can run a development practice pretty lean and mean. When I hear people that are saying, I just only flip one house, I just want you to know that when is enough experience, that's just never going to be the point. As long as you've seen somewhat of the process and you have an idea, what you're getting yourself into. And anybody can get an idea pretty quickly by watching some YouTube videos or listening to podcasts and reading a few books, being in the right rooms. If you flip one or multiple houses, you're not starting over. You're actually just stepping into a more strategic role by going into ground up development. Some people think they're too early for development and others think they're too advanced for development. I can tell you that my timing wasn't always perfect. I've had a crazy entrepreneurial journey. I came to the US in 2011 for the first time, gave up my full ride sports scholarship in 2012, went back to Germany, then had an opportunity to go to China, work for Mercedes-Benz in 2013, and then come back to the US in 2014, graduated in 16, and between that traveled a bunch. And I thought I was just going to be on Wall Street working as an investment banker. I had an offer there for an M&A role, and they couldn't sponsor me. I ended up having to figure out everything from scratch after really having thought I have a full game plan. That was the first time that performance just didn't work anymore. I was hit by the system and learned the system from there on really intimately. But I thought my entire timing, everything was off, that I essentially screwed up. I moved to New York City in 2016 and I realized, okay, I am in the right spot. I learned the startup scene there very intimately, and I still pull from that experience. I did that for about a year and a half and went back to Nashville in 2017, October. And that's really when I started flipping my first properties at the time. I knew that was great timing because the market was just about to take off here in Nashville. But now, in retrospect, I've been in the business for about 8.5 years. And I can tell you that I've missed some of the timings, and some timings were great. You have both, right? But the timing isn't always right. And so I just want you to think about that. When I started, at the end of the day, I just knew, okay, this is the next step. I knew that I was going to ultimately be a business owner. I'm going to be a real estate investor. Why not take that leap and let's just learn on the job? The sooner you can take that leap, the better off you are, because you're obviously learning the youngest age possible, pretty much whenever you're faced with that curiosity of what is development actually about? What does it take? How do I get started? There's no better opportunity than now. And so I really think that way. I really was so glad I was immersed 2017 full on, and I haven't stopped since. But, I can tell you that I didn't always nail timing right. I had multiple restarts over the years, and I'm really glad I had them in retrospect, because that's every time when I reinvent myself and grow to the next stage, right? I don't think you can ever be too early or too late. The timing is always how it's supposed to be, in my opinion. It also takes giving up some safe paths to be able to explore and pave new paths that are going to then help you reach that next growth stage. I think it is more important to be ahead on discipline and behind on clarity. There were so many times where I thought my timing just was completely off. There were multiple moments on paper where my timing just didn't make sense. It was misaligned. And then there were some times where I thought, oh my God, I'm too advanced. But at the same time, again, based on my experience, there's no better starting point than now to learn and to immerse and take that leap, especially when you're surrounded with the right people. Readiness isn't about timing. It is about whether you're willing to change how you make decisions. Everyone thinks their market is different. And I'll never forget what the global head for M&A at Deloitte said to me in 2015. He said, Josephine, why would you do the same work for less upside in a smaller market? So understanding the scaling differences firsthand and like early has helped me immensely. Understanding like whenever I see that I could be doing the same work and it has just a tremendously higher payoff, like essentially having asymmetric rewards to the risk you take on, why would you settle for something that is not scalable or as scalable? And I think that's really something to keep in mind. It's really powerful. And I do believe that the opportunities in various different markets, obviously they may shift and history also repeats itself in their cycles that you have to be aware of. But at the end of the day, there are opportunities and you just got to seek them out. I think it's really important understanding patterns. Pattern recognition is, I think, one of the absolute crucial tools for success. So I think Tony Robbins also talks about how important pattern recognition is. And it's even more important in urban planning, right? Across the US cities, there's so many of the same patterns, and really learning and studying those will also help you just, become a better real estate developer. I've operated in vastly different markets. I've worked in Germany and 2 different cities. I've worked in China, Beijing. I've worked in New York City and Nashville. I have seen various different cultures at play in different communities. Your market isn't the reason why you're stuck. Avoiding making a decision usually is. Let me be very clear who this is not for. This isn't for everyone. If you want shortcuts, don't do this. Over the years, I've seen what doesn't work. I have lost it all before in 2020 and I rebuilt. It takes grit. It takes perseverance. I highly recommend for you not to learn on your own. I did so much by myself. And at the time when I started, there wasn't really truly like coaching for the specific niche. And so that is also partially why I created it. I think it is so important to be surrounded with people that are a few steps ahead of you. I've had a few really good mentors, but also a lot of them are in different niches than really what it is that I have been doing. I've lived through the cost of doing everything myself, and you always pay a price for learning. It's either voluntary, and I tell you that is a whole lot less expensive, or involuntarily by really just screwing up big time. And those mistakes usually hit you at the very worst timing and unexpectedly. So that's been a big push for building this community, just feeling so passionate about it, because doing things in isolation actually come at a much greater if you're working with people who can also support you while you're going through something. In 2020, I entangled a business partnership, and that was really expensive. And these legal battles don't come cheap. So I think it's so important that you learn from people that have been there, done that, what structures work and what doesn't. And don't just think like, oh, hey, I'm going to form an LLC. I'm just going to wing this. I'm going to do a project. It's going to be all fine. Yeah, don't do that. That is the most expensive cost of learning. It's essentially ignorance, right? And realizing that it takes a team to be successful rather than just you on your own. I think that's been a huge lesson for me over the years, that being able to rely on people that you have shared values with. I think that's the number one piece too, like understanding very early on that you have to have shared values. If you're not sharing the same values, you're not going to be in business together long. And so I think it is really a business for people that are constant learners and are looking to build extraordinary businesses and want to have an impact in the community. Obviously want to grow also financially, personally, and like their family, build generational wealth. But especially, it is for people that are not going to give up, that are committing to the discipline no matter what, and like are able to ride those roller coasters ultimately through thick and thin. I've built frameworks because pain demanded it, and now those frameworks can help so many other people. But they also still help me every day. I'm continuously adding to them as I go on. Like it's a learning journey, right? As I mentioned, I think you got to be a learner to be a really successful real estate developer. Like you constantly have to also personally develop yourself, like investing in yourself, growing yourself. That's essentially the starting and not just the ending point, but like the constant in this journey. Fit matters so much more than experience, and this only works if you're willing to take responsibility how you operate. You're going to constantly evolve and tweak your operations to what works and what doesn't. I've learned a lot of this by doing it the wrong way. Man, I've screwed up plenty of times. And so, I'm grateful that I've learned early in my career at the end of the day, right? Every single time I screwed up, those are the most effective lessons. And these are the lessons that I love to pass on now so that others are not making the same pitfalls. So the real question isn't, will this work for me? I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have guarantees. I just had agency and strong will and drive to continue to push forward, whatever it takes, right? I remember a pivotal moment in Central Park. I was sitting on this really large rock and looking at this residential tower where it's like 100 million, 80 million, 60 million down. It's like the highest tower in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know if it still is, but it was at the time. And I just was let go essentially from Hilton Grand Vacation. And I knew that, again, it was forward time. So it wasn't really a true surprise, but it was a surprise, right? And I walked down from the penthouse on 6th Avenue into Central Park, sitting on this rock, and I called a sports friend of mine. On purpose, didn't call my mom because I knew that was not going to be that much helpful. I knew she was going to be freaked out by me not having really a job or a way to financially support myself. So I called this friend, and he's a professional basketball player, and I told him what happened, whatnot, right? He basically said, well, Josephine, congratulations. Now you have actually the time for all the things that you said you would want to do anyway. So take 24 hours, 48 hours, cry, do whatever you need to do, and then come up with a plan on how you're going to do this. But yeah, congrats. And I was like, what? It was so pivotal because by the time I walked out of Central Park, I decided to put my apartment on Airbnb just to get some short-term cash. I started financial coaching. So I told several good friends that I knew would spread the word. Hey, I'm going to give you 6 sessions for free. And please just tell all your friends. And then I called up my former business partner and said, hey, I'm in. Let's start flipping properties. And that's when I moved back to Nashville, Tennessee, right? That was a pivotal moment. But I didn't ask myself, oh, will this work for me? At the end of the day, clarity didn't come first. Action did. That's really how it works. Like, I don't think that there are guarantees given for life-changing type paths where you know, okay, well, when this works out, then not when, if, not if, when, then like it's going to be a catalyst, right? And those type of catalysts don't come with guarantees. They don't come with a safety net. They come with true action and just like agency over your own. And I think that's just something to really keep in mind. That's really treated me super well. Choosing responsibility over certainty is key. The question is not whether this will work for you. The question is whether you're ready to step into a different role, and keep that in mind. I think that will treat you really well. It's treated me super well. It's been part of my journey. I hope you have a few takeaways from watching this video. Will development actually work for me? See you in the next one.